Welcome to the Crosscheck, Business Aviation's squawk sheet that uncovers the stories, challenges, and careers shaping the industry today. I'm your host, Rob Hoffman.
And I'm Ian Lump.
We're joined today by Andrew Schmertz, CEO and co-founder of Hopscotch Air, an air taxi service based on Long Island, New York. Andrew's journey from Emmy-winning broadcaster to aviation entrepreneur is, quite frankly, a fascinating one. We'll discuss how Hopscotch Air is redefining air taxi service, the challenges of the industry today, and what the future holds for regional air mobility and on-demand aviation. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Ian, for having me on. A quick correction. I'm not an Emmy winner. I am an Emmy-nominated individual. I've never actually won the Emmy, but I'll take the nomination. So thank you.
The devil's in the details. I appreciate the connection. If it means anything, Andrew, I've been following your career for a long time. I would have given you the award.
Thank you.
But why don't we just use that as a perfect launching pad for taking a step back into your career? It is not a traditional one that brought you into aviation. I'd love to hear how you got to where you are today.
You know, I like to joke that I left the stable media industry for the stable aviation industry. I began as a broadcast journalist out of college, worked for a number of organizations, first News 12 Long Island. Then I went to New York One. I ended up at Business Week Television, and they kind of farmed me out to the ABC own and operate stations. And, you know, it's a great career. Television is both fun. Television news is both different every single day, but the grind gets to you after a while. After you get fired from a number of jobs, you know, you get kind of depressed and in a rut. You know, so I went to law school, never practiced law. But at the time, I was also learning to fly. I had always wanted to learn to fly. And I got my pilot's license.
More of a hobby thing, just a personal kind of
just
endeavor?
Just a hobby thing, you know, poke some holes in the sky kind of thing, you know, in a little Cherokee 140, learned to fly on Long Island. And then as the years kind of went on, around 2009, this air taxi bubble started percolating. And you may remember the stories how very light jets were going to darken the skies. It's going to democratize private aviation. And I hate that phrase because it's just not true. And then all the VLJs kind of went out of business, right? But, you know, I talked to a couple people who I known very long. My cousin joined me at first. My good friend from college is still my partner in the company, and talked to them about and they had also been my first passengers. So they figured, okay, I survived going with Andrew in an airplane, maybe we'll go into business together. And so we had talked about developing an air taxi company along the lines of what was being proposed throughout the industry. We could not raise enough money to buy a very light jet, so we couldn't buy the Eclipse jets, which were probably good. We couldn't buy the Atom aircraft. Remember those? All of those have gone by the wayside. However, we could afford the Cirrus aircraft. And so we started looking into Cirrus and whether this was a viable option. And there was a company I believe in North Carolina called Satsair, which was using Cirrus aircraft. We looked at the model. And we thought that this aircraft could be the right fit. And we began the path of going down the road of certification. And there's a lot of education between us. We had to learn a lot. And the FAA, because the FAA was not used to approving these aircraft in a Part 135 operation, which is the regulations that we operate under. But we did it. We were certificated in January of 2009 and have been in business somehow ever since.
So now that you've switched industries and now that you've taken the leap and it's a successful one, taking a look back now, is there any guidance or anything you can share here about sort of making this transition and being a part of the aviation industry?
I think with any business, it comes down to perseverance. So you have to have the vision and you have to have the dream and you have to buck what looks like reality. So everybody's going to tell you that it's going to fail. No matter what business you start, you're going to fail. You're going to face what looks like insurmountable obstacles. And you just take them one at a time and you overcome them one by one and you eventually get there. You know, at the end of the day, you may not be successful. Company may not work out, but that in itself is a rewarding experience going through that process. So I think my first piece of advice would be know what your vision is, know where you're going. There's an old line, if you don't know where you're going, all roads take you there, right? So know where you want to go, where you want to end up, then work backwards and find that pathway and just keep persevering, keep pushing through.
Awesome. Now, obviously there's no guarantees and the world is littered with failed entrepreneurs, but you did it. So Hopscotch Air, you've been in business now since 2009. It's a success. What sets it apart in the world of regional air travel, particularly in this crowded, weird airspace that is Long Island?
I think a couple things set us apart. And, we actually operate, our base of operations is Long Island. We primarily operate out of Westchester County. That's where our business tends to be, but we still do flights off of Long Island. I think what separates Hopscotch Air out is a few different areas. What is more commonplace now than when we began is being a branded air taxi operator. So our name is on the side of the plane. Pilots wear Hopscotch Air shirts. We're very aggressive in marketing and public relations, which is sort of my background in media. That is unusual. When we went into business, other charter operators at Farmingdale say, why do you have your name on the airplane? You're going to ruin the entire industry for everybody, because they were getting most of their business, if not all of their business, from brokers. We take maybe 5% of our business from brokers. So that was a differentiator. And we believe that we are actually a leader in the marketing efforts. Well, way before Wheels Up was doing it, before VistaJet was doing it, we were sort of, I think, on the cutting edge of that. And we've done a number of marketing deals with kind of major league companies to give us the halo effect. So we had a deal for years with the Swiss International Airlines. We had a deal with the New York Islanders. We got bumped down to the minor leagues this year. We're partners with the Bridgeport Islanders now, but that's okay. So I think that's one of the differentiators. The other differentiator is, we are a utilitarian service. So you're not showing up. We're not giving you a caviar or a glass of champagne when you get on board. It's simply, we are flying you from point A to point B. We're not booking you a car service. We're going to help get your bags onto the plane, get you into the airplane. We have a phrase, get to the airport, get on the airplane, get to your destination. That is the core business, which also has downsides. I admit to that. But when customers first call, and if they're new customers, and if they're used to being in the charter world, they ask for a number of things. And we say, no, you don't do any of those things. And, eventually they get it. They go, okay, I get it. That's fine. And, when we look at the numbers, half of our new customers have never been in a private aircraft before. So we actually believe we are expanding the pie. We're not democratizing private aviation. That does not exist. Nobody in the real world, in our world, is going to pay $3,000 to fly to Nantucket, which is a more expensive price than flying to Singapore, right? But we are certainly expanding the number of people who can use the service and are exposed to private aviation. And I think that's good for the industry.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Wheels Up, and we can take a look back over the last decade, and it seems like, the space has been littered with failed or near failed, operators who try to brand themselves, right? I think they're more upscale than you. And maybe is that the differentiator? How come you're still around while all the others have struggled so mightily?
Yeah, there's one specifically that used to fly a bunch of these that doesn't exist anymore for that very same reason, right? So
right. So
that.
Yeah, you might be referring to Jettit, and
yeah.
And I know the folks at Jettit, and I know Glenn, and that was a very hard failure. I don't want to criticize any other companies. I think that Wheels Up may have made a mistake because they're operating in a very exclusive space and they're not matching their costs with their revenue, which is always a problem in any industry. That's sort of my back of the envelope, not really knowing the details of that. I think Wheels Up are brilliant marketers. Kenny has been, he's been in this business for decades. He's extraordinarily smart and an excellent marketer. So I don't really know the clear answer to that, but, we have, and we could just still do a better job of it, but we are intensely focused on the costs of the business. We understand when we do a flight, did we lose money? Did we make money? Where do we lose money? Is it the weather delays? Is it ATC delays? Is it passenger delays? We try to analyze that to the best a small business can, because if you don't have that data, you are going to be lost in the woods. That's really, in the aviation industry, probably more so than most industries. You don't know the price of your product until after you sell it, the cost of your product until after you sell it. And because of that, you have to constantly be, reevaluating the pricing. And we go back to customers often. We say, we're going to raise our prices. And in this environment, people understand price hikes, right? But And they say, why? And I say, these are the cost structures that we're facing. And if you want to continue using the service, if you want us to still be around, we have to adjust pricing. I think in the aviation industry, especially in the branded high-priced charter world, there has been too much of a focus of getting the customers and figuring it out later, which is kind of the Amazon model, right? Yeah. But Amazon is able to do it because they first started selling books. And they had a lot of investment money, and they turned around that company into a behemoth, right? But in the aviation space, if you do that too long, you run out of money. And that's what kind of happens.
Yeah, you're not private equity backed, right? And you never did the SPAC, none of that stuff here where you're sort of, I think that that's a possibility here, that a lot of these other carriers, these 135 operators that were doing this stuff at scale, were sort of beholden to the investors to sort of like basically grow the market as fast as possible, forget about the costs, and then we'll figure it out later at scale. And I guess no matter what, it just seems like they all ran out of runway eventually. And I think by being small and lean, that's sort of potentially been your secret sauce.
And we face the same pressures, by the way. We're a smaller private company. We have a relatively large shareholder base for a small private company. I hear that from shareholders too. You got to grow faster, and we would love to grow faster, but we need to match it carefully with the resources on hand. SPACs, I think, have done a disservice to not just the aviation industry overall, and I think the SEC, I think in this environment, if anybody's working at the SEC anymore, probably will look at the SPAC market because, SPACs are basically the old reverse mergers. They just renamed them, and they came in with a lot of money. And that's the problem. When you do this deal and you have $100 million in the bank, you think, I have $100 million in the bank. I'm rich. You can burn through that money until you have zero.
Yeah, it's basically Wall Street has, I think, grown really sour on SPACs in general, but I think they've particularly clobbered a lot of the EVTOL startups and other players in our space here, and it's done everyone a disservice. Is there anything else, though, when we're looking at the bottom line as far as technology that's helping you out, that's getting you leaner, whether it's fleet management, booking platforms, any kind of innovation in the aviation space that's sort of helping you do your job better or more economically?
It's a good question. We use all of the off-the-shelf tools that are available. I would think that probably some better flight planning tools might make our jobs a little easier. Most of the tools out there are not designed for single-engine piston aircraft, and the Cirrus is unique in that aspect. So we have to do a lot of reverse engineering on our side to figure out whether, like I said before, whether flights are profitable or not. We always consistently try to reduce our overhead, but that's incredibly difficult. I don't know where technology will help, but, the insurance industry right now, insurance is very tight, especially in the Part 135 world, especially on our level in the Part 135 world. Maintenance costs are going up. We are looking to acquire some maintenance options. So that all kind of dovetails together. I would say the technology the Cirrus has certainly helped our jobs and our business. The Cirrus aircraft, I don't know if you fly Cirruses, but
I trained on an SR-20. Yeah, I have flown them.
Okay, so and the data the planes collect help us also analyze the flights. How did the pilots do this flight? Were they flying at 75% power or 65% power? All of that. And that technology did not exist on this level until really Cirrus, I think, and Garmin put that into the aircraft. And so that technology certainly helps. From an operations standpoint, we fly to minimums. Again, something that did not exist on this level for years. We fly into known icing. Well, fly through known icing from a legal perspective. We don't fly into known icing.
You're not supposed to hang out there. Yeah.
We don't hang out there. And obviously the parachute. All of these things have helped propel the business forward.
Looking ahead now, I want to talk more about the future of regional air mobility, EVTOLs. I know you're associated with Transcend Air. Tell us more about how you feel that's going to impact your space, and what's the reality index of you getting your hands dirty with an EVTOL in the next decade?
So first, Transcend itself is not an EVTOL maker. They're a VTOL maker. They're focused on traditional dinosaur burning fuel.
Because not even hybrid? They're not going for the hydrogen model?
They're looking at hybrid, and their plan is to eventually get to electric. But their argument and their pitch is we could build this aircraft today, and this aircraft has great utility today. and could burn traditional fuel today. You know, New York City has already turned over the heliports to a EVTOL heliport company, a Skyport. So they are, they've jumped in all in, I think, way too early into EVTOLs. You know, I would describe myself as skeptically optimistic with EVTOLs and electric aircraft altogether. We have deals with Bi Aerospace, which is a fixed wing electric aircraft maker. I think the EVTOLs face a number of challenges besides just making the machine and getting it to fly to the range that they would have to fly to be serviceable. There's infrastructure issues. There's community acceptance. There's a number of obstacles. And right now, I think what's powering the EVTOL investment is hope and not necessarily grounded in reality, which is fine. By the way, that's fine. That's how innovation comes together. But I think those are real overhangs for the industry. And, you know, we've seen 2 recent large bankruptcies in the eVTOL space because none of these companies are obviously generating any money right now because they don't actually have a product. Joby and Archer are getting close, but I don't know how close.
Yeah, those are the 2 ones to watch. But I want to just dial it back for a second here and talk about Bi Aerospace. So that's still, it's not eVTOL, but it's electric. So tell me more about your association with them and how bullish you are on electric aircraft.
Yeah, so I'm more bullish on fixed-wing electric aircraft because they're using the infrastructure in place. Right? They're using runways. And if they figure out the charging capabilities, I think they'll get there quicker. So we're bullish because that business is our business, right? So we know the customers show up to the airports already. So they won't even know if they get into an electric aircraft. So it's a question of whether those electric aircraft have the range to do our missions, and if they are supported by infrastructure to charge them. Yeah. And Bi Aerospace will tell you that they could build this aircraft, and they are building this aircraft today. It's all been approved. You know, the various components have been approved by the FAA. They just have to kind of put them all together.
And you got Beta as well up in New England. Do you have any association with them or any talks about bringing their aircraft into your fleet?
Other than my friend from law school, his wife's brother is a top executive at Beta. We have not had any conversations with Beta, but we know that Atlantic Aviation has, and they're our landlord at White Plains. So we're always willing to talk. We'll talk to anybody, and we'll figure out what tool. I describe the aircraft. I don't think Cirrus would be happy with this description, but I describe the aircraft as a tool of the business. Doesn't matter what the airplane is because our passengers, our customers don't care. They just want safety, convenience, price point that's acceptable, and comfort to get them to their location at a reasonable price.
Awesome. Well, kind of on that note, shifting gears from the electric side of things, I do want to look at what the future is for Hopscotch, and then kind of your vision for branded air taxi services in general, because it is something that there's a ton of growth potential in. What's going to come from the future has to start with regulatory issues and kind of what changes you may see on the horizon here, especially when it comes to airspace management and the impact that that's going to have on you in the future.
Yeah, I think actually one of the biggest challenges for us is the pilot shortage. So I am convinced that we could put 100 Cirrus aircraft in the Northeast between Farmingdale, Long Island, Westchester County, and Boston, and fly those planes between May and September every single day. Can we find the 100 or so pilots who are qualified to fly the aircraft who are not going to go run off to the airlines immediately? That's the big question. And so the pilot shortage is the biggest challenge, actually. Getting the aircraft, it's just writing a check, right? So you just need to find people to support that. Cirrus can punch out a number of airplanes, and we can collect them. And there's a number of late model used aircraft out there that are available. So we can get the aircraft, but we can't manufacture the pilots. And the pilot issue is the biggest issue right now. So the future of the air taxi industry is, I think that the Hopscotch model is a viable model in most markets in this country to augment the regional travel of people. We don't compete really with the airlines as much as with driving. Everywhere we fly to, you can drive in 4 or 5 hours. So that's really where the competition is. And so it comes down to the pain on the price point. Does the price point match the service? And does it come down to having the pilot availability to perform those flights? And, the business can be quite successful. The traditional jet charter market, if you look at how often those planes fly, you have a $60 million, let's say, legacy. And the average is it does 1.1 hours a day. That's like building a $60 million factory, and it's open from 9 a.m. until 10:20 in the morning, and then everybody goes home. It's a complete waste of resources, and that industry is supported by wealthy owners of those jets, and they are subsidizing that industry for their own purposes, so it's mutually beneficial. But those companies are basically aircraft management companies, right? And they add on charter on top of that. We don't believe that's a long-term viable business. And I think, Delta went through that when they owned Delta Jets. That was Delta Jets' business model. Now Delta, again, owns Wheels Up, but so they kind of closed the loop on that. But with the Cirrus aircraft and with the aircraft we're flying, we think that's a standalone viable business. It should not be our only business. We think that we need to get into other services to kind of offset the seasonality. But that is a core business.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, because you obviously have a really good relationship with Cirrus. How about the Cirrus jet? That's never been a part of your equation?
We've looked at it, and
it's a VLJ. Essentially, it's the new iteration of a VLJ.
And it's a terrific aircraft. It's a terrific personal aircraft. We don't know if it's viable from the charter standpoint. There's a number of operators who have tried it, and I know a couple that have dropped it who had multi-fleet and added a Vision jet. There's one company out there that is exclusively a Cirrus Vision jet operator. I'll let it speak for itself. So I don't know the viability of it, because if you look at a Cirrus Vision jet, the operating costs are pretty similar to a Pilatus PC-12. And, the PC-12, you can put the whole circus on board, right? But again, the Vision jet is a phenomenal machine. We would look at it if we can get it. I come back to this owner subsidy issue. If an owner is willing to pay to try it. With our marketing skills, we probably could make that work, but I don't know if we could build an entire business around it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that that's also kind of going back to why Jet-It unfortunately didn't take off in the way that it should have, when your costs are so much more than something that you can fit 3 or 4 more people on. I think that the Vision jet, and maybe in its infancy, the SR-22, were geared more towards owner operators that just want to take their family for a weekend, but also need to go do business trips on a day-to-day basis, and that works. But if your price point per person is more than what it is to rent a Citation or a Legacy or something where you can get more people for your buck, you're definitely going to see people lean towards that, especially in the charter world.
That's right.
Don't hitch your wagon to that specific horse and hope for it to be exactly what you need it to be. But I do want to ask you kind of where you see this in 5 to 10 years. Is it something that could expand out to bigger aircraft, or is this maybe
or bigger markets?
Yeah, global expansion.
Or other markets. You're already in a pretty big one.
Yeah, we're fortunate. We are in the biggest and probably wealthiest market. So the answer is, I think it definitely could expand to other markets. You obviously need a significantly wealth base in those markets, because the service is still a premium service. You need a base of people who more travel towards business. We have similar problems that the airlines have, whereby, the business travel supports the leisure travel in the airline industry. Our business travel is not as big as I would like it to be. It's still primarily, not exclusively, but primarily a leisure travel model. So if we can evolve that model a little bit, it could definitely work in other markets. We've looked at other markets, and, it's just a question for ours, a question of money and capacity of what, how much brain space we have to manage other markets. I would not move up in size in aircraft, except maybe the PC-12, because that's a very successful regional airline platform, if you will.
Surf Air, for better or worse, has been operating them for years, right? I'm sure, and there are lots of other operators. They're not the sole one, but one that's a company that's a carrier that's, I think, closer mirroring to your business model than anyone else.
Yeah, I would actually look at Tradewind and in Connecticut. They're very successful. Surf Air has some issues, especially since the acquisition of Southern Express. They're trying to figure out those models, and the key is but Surf Air is onto the right equation, because where the growth is going to happen is in the regional travel market. The airlines have all pulled back from regional travel. They've ended many relationships with their regional carriers. ExpressJet, for example. United has just ended one with their regional partner. EAS routes have been dropping. If you look at the EAS map, which is a Central Air Service, that's government subsidized regional airline service, There's a number of EAS markets that are underserved. That's all because they were operating these markets with too big aircraft. They're too large for the market. You can operate many of these areas with small turboprops.
Yeah.
And regional travel, the majority of travel in this country, I think it's over 75%, is within a couple hundred miles of your home. That's where the growth is going to happen, especially as the roads get worse, as traffic starts to pile up on those roads. People are going to look for alternatives. People are already looking for alternatives. And that is where the growth is going to happen. And that's where the airlines have abandoned, honestly, the regional travel. They all want to fly you to London or to the West Coast or the East Coast if you live on the West Coast. They're not really interested in what is a market that has a lot more friction in it. It's a harder business, I think, but there's more growth potential in there.
I have a lot of experience dealing with that market. I live right down the street from an EAS-served airport, and it just flies from here to Chicago, back and forth, ORD all day long. And that's fantastic, but you're not going to fill a CRJ every time you're turning around between little old Fort Dodge, Iowa, and Chicago. But a service like yours would save me from a 7-hour car ride to go see my family in Chicago.
And Ian, it's funny. I feel like 7 hours is the magic number of driving. It's just a little too far for that day trip. I think that's where I imagine, Andrew, where a lot of your trips kind of are covering that ground.
Yeah, absolutely. We do a number of trips, let's say to Montreal and Saranac Lake, out to Nantucket. If you were in a car, it could take certainly that long to get there. And to your point, Ian, some Part 380 operators, and I don't want to get it too far into the weeds of what Part 380 is, but it's basically a charter operator that's operating as if it's a scheduled airline, are looking at those markets and exploiting those markets and doing a good job. So JSX is in those markets, Contour is in those markets, and they're flying them appropriately with 30-seat aircraft. And so they've right-sized the business, and they appear to be doing well.
Yeah, I feel like JSX is the one to watch. They seem like they're getting some traction, and I'm reading positive things about them.
They're very specific in where they're at right now, which is good. Stick to what you know, but we'll see that expand hopefully pretty rapidly as people get away from commercial flights.
Well, I do feel, Andrew, the name of the game in this business is being conservative, and I kind of feel like you really dialed in the formula really well. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
That here you are sitting here talking to us today. You run a successful business now for 15 plus years, and kudos to you for cracking the code where so many others have failed.
It's a business that's still in business, which in the aviation world is a success.
That's a win.
I don't have a bunch of condos in Miami, but we've survived. In aviation dog years, we're 99 years old, and I think that's a testament not to me, by the way, but to our team.
Yeah.
And to our advisors because we could do 4-hour podcasts on all the mistakes I personally made in running this business and continue to make. You don't know what mistakes you're making until after you made them. And it takes a village. Yeah. And it takes an effort to be successful. And I think you're right. I think we've kind of cracked the code. But that's a testament, like I said, to everybody in the company and to our customers, by the way. Our customers are great.
Wonderful. I think that does it for time right now. Andrew, you're very busy on social media. Why don't you share with the listeners at home where they can find you and Hopscotch Air?
Yeah, so they can find Hopscotch on Instagram, Hopscotch Air, where we are very active on social media. Sometimes I'm personally too active on social media and I get pushed back and piss people off.
I enjoy following you. You're entertaining, to say the least.
It's the new world of communicating, right?
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn. People can please connect with me on LinkedIn. I accept almost all invitations, and I like talking to people from diverse fields and diverse backgrounds.
Andrew, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really great, enlightening conversation we had here.
Thank you. It's fun.
Reminder for everyone else to follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to this podcast, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Your review or feedback is greatly appreciated. It really helps to spread the word. Any subject you'd like us to cover, just leave it in the comments below. We will see you all next week with a new episode of The Crosscheck.